Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Ric McConkey, the founder of FMeX, on the show today. And as I learned, it is FMeX, not FMeX, even though that's how it's spelled. I didn't know much about his career before we chatted today, so it was fascinating to hear how he went from being an English major in college to eventually starting a digital marketing and content distribution platform. I'm always fascinated by folks that were working in financial services back in the 80s and 90s and to see just how far we've come as a profession in the last 30 years, but also to be able to see how far we may go over the next 30 years. We talked about Ric's career path that led him to starting FMeX and how they work with advisors to implement a content strategy to stay in front of prospects and clients. We closed out with a discussion on some of the new projects FMeX is working on, including producing audio content leveraging Audible, which I think will be the next wave of marketing for financial advisors, and I'm fascinated to see how FMeX implements some of those strategies. This month's podcasts are brought to you by Financial Media Exchange, the world's largest content library built exclusively for the financial planning industry, with content from industry experts like Morningstar, Kiplinger, and former Fed economists. FMeX brings financial advisors thousands upon thousands of pieces of unique content that is timely, relevant, and can be personalized. And financial advisors need to know that over 70% of their clients say content marketing makes them feel closer to their advisor. FMeX publishes new content every day, offers 12 different newsletters, and enables financial advisors to quickly send branded content from their phone, desktop, or tablet to our clients want. Email, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, websites, blogs, and daily newsletters. I can tell you firsthand that FMeX offers a great experience for the financial advisor and a better experience for the financial advisor's client. You can learn more at www.fmexdirect.com. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/102. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Ric. Hey, Ric, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm really excited because we met, I guess, last year at the XYPN conference. I'm trying to remember, were you launching FMeX around that time, or did it actually launch at the conference?
We did a soft launch in September at the FPA in Boston.
And that was like a week before our conference or something like that.
Right. So we did a soft launch. We had the ability, we spent a full year developing the platform, going through the exercise of developing the platform. And then we rolled it out. We kind of took a step back and then really relaunched it the following February. So it's been February 2016 when we really hit the market.
Gotcha. So February 2016?
Yep, 2016.
Okay. So it's been about a year and a half then. So let's take a step back and we'll learn a little bit about sort of your career path and what led to FMeX, and then we'll dig into that a little bit. So has your career always been sort of marketing, digital technology, that sort of thing? Or I guess where did your career start?
I was an English major at UMass Boston, and it was in the early 80s. So what happened was the mutual fund industry was really just kind of blowing up in the Boston area. So I ended up at State Street Bank, and there was a small division called Boston Financial Data Services, which is basically the shareholder accounting side of the business. And it was one of those situations where I never had any plan to be in the financial service industry, and next thing you know, you're getting promoted just to a level of incompetency, and they never really figured me out. So we just kept on going, and I got recruited down to Wall Street. And so from there, I went into product marketing, and we rolled out a family of funds through Oppenheimer and Company. It used to be a pretty viable marketplace, and probably after 10 years at State Street and BFDS, down in 1990, right after that last crash, I was the guy that went down to New York to replace the 100,000 jobs that were lost on Wall Street. And we launched the family mutual funds down there. And that's really when I started to kind of understand the product side and distribution. And while it was a captured sales force with OpCo, we were really selling out to the regional broker dealers and the wirehouses as well. And that's really where I cut my teeth on the whole idea of intermediary distribution and pushing product into that channel.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's such a different world than I've ever lived in, and I think that many listeners live in. And to understand sort of where financial planning came from, and it really did come from that product distribution side, which is, I guess where financial planning kind of got its roots, because we used to be nothing but stockbrokers, and then we started selling funds, and then we, sort of became investment managers, and then we, continued to move up the value chain. So it's always fascinating to me to see where we were in the 90s, well before I was in the industry, to sort of see where we've actually come from.
Yeah, we had, so it's kind of funny because I still have this conversation today, because I remember going into presentations in conference rooms, and I was the youngest guy at the table, and I don't know what happened. I think I blinked, and now I'm the oldest guy at the table. And you got to be very careful about talking about war stories but everyone wants to know what happened on Wall Street in the 80s and 90s. And it was a very different time. But at the same time, if you were a salesperson, you had to have a roll of dimes on you, and you had to know where the best places to have conference calls so you could dial in through a payphone, which is unheard of today, right? You say the word quotron. What is a quotron, right? And it's funny, when I went down to New York, I remember we set up our own syndicate desk. And it's just because I didn't really know better. We set up our own syndicate desk to do a global fund. I was Novell certified, if you remember that product, Novell. We had a local area network that me and the traders in the desk were working off of. And I had a problem, and I called Technology Group. And they said, "Rick, is that a personal computer?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, that's a personal problem." And he hung up on me, because it was the land of mainframes. And that was where we were back then. So it's changed very differently. And I remember with the Quest for Value Fund, I actually developed for our wholesalers what I call the disposable database, where we're actually taking sales data, and we were actually pushing all the transactions down to them nightly through a modem hookup so they could see what their sales numbers were. And then the next day, we'd blow that whole file away and give them a new file. And it was a concept of a disposable database. There's no cloud. There were no mobile phones. There was really no internet. So changed dramatically. And now it's like, we used to talk about 5-year business plans. Now you're talking about 6-month business plans.
Yeah, it's very interesting to think, I've got a 2-year-old, and I just turned 30. And so I think about that's where you were 30 years ago. In 30 years, where are we going to be? I'm turning 60. My kid thinks iPads are the most outdated technology of all time, and probably won't be able to believe that, I used to have one. Because I remember my first PC. He won't remember the iPad in the house. And who knows what he'll actually remember getting and what we develop from here. But just to think about the rate of change in the industry and what the previous 30 years have given us and what the next 30 years could give us, and just all the potential that's out there. And especially in an industry where we tend to be very stuck and very, slow to adapt change and that sort of thing, which is going to be a huge detriment to a lot of firms, I think, going forward.
Well, the first thing is, they say it's a herd mentality, especially in the financial service marketplace, right? We all kind of move together, but we're moving a lot quicker. It's a much faster herd than it's ever been, right? But to your point with your children, right? Everyone's seen the video of a small child, a toddler, going up to a TV and swiping it, trying to change the channel, right? Where did they learn these things? And we talk about, we're trying to help, going back to what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to bring relevant content to the advisor's client from the advisor, repositioning them with a conversation with their client when they're not exactly in front of them. These guys need no help when they are the product, and when their clients are with them in a conference room or in their office or at the kitchen table, they don't need our help. What we're trying to do is solve the problem is when the client's not in front of the advisor, how do I keep relevant? How do I keep what we call the content cadence going so they don't forget about us? And it's an interesting thing. We talk about all the time at this point where we say, hey, you know what? I text my kids, I email my wife, and I call my mother. And every time I call my mother, she says I don't call her enough. But the reality of that is I have 3 or 4 different forms of communication to the people, my network of contacts. And now we talk about Snapchat out there, and I'm communicating through Facebook. It goes on. What's the new one, right? Think about even texting alone. The whole emoji thing is just a whole different. Where is that going to be in 10 years? Are we even going to be using words? You talk to some of these people that talk about the written word. It's a very short period of time that the written word has actually been around, and it's almost disappearing again. And my chief content officer, Stephen Barrett, we kid with him all the time. He goes, our stuff is very popular with the advisors, but you know what? Nobody reads anything. If I don't have a really big image up there or a really nice H1 or H2 that kind of grabs the attention, you need the visual to go with the content, or it just looks like a market. It looks like a market. No one's going to read a 35-page market commentary on how to hedge China. I mean, they might read a couple paragraphs, but no, it's soundbite. It's a soundbite world.
So for anyone not familiar, H1 and H2 are large headers. That's HTML code, but large headers that you put at the top of an article. But yeah, the image or those big headers, sort of that popping text to say, this is what this article is going to be about. Open rates, click rates, read-through rates are all significantly higher when you're using engaging visuals or videos or animated clips or things like that. But so I'll circle back to this because I want to dig in a little bit more on this. But so you were in New York, getting some of these funds off the ground and doing that type of thing. I guess how did that lead, I guess, to the next stages of your career? It's
funny because I've always been an early adopter, and I've been on the sales side of the business, on the marketing side of the business, product development and technology. So I hate to use the term, but I touched a lot of different things, but I really liked the technology and how it was driving. So from that part of my career, at some point, I decided, we're in New York, my kids were growing up. It's very difficult to, one day I came home and I saw my kids playing in the parking lot, digging with a spoon or a little piece of dirt. I go, we got to move back to Boston, right? I had a house back there. So we moved back so that we could put into the thing. And then I started my second wave of a career. I did a couple of deals with Carl Vidner. I don't know if people remember him. He was part of the Circle K and Drexel out in Cincinnati. Then from there, I went back to New York for a while, but I was commuting between Boston and New York with Goldman Sachs. And there I went over the whole sales platform, distribution. And it's kind of funny because we reeked of retail. I was in Goldman Sachs asset management. So I was not with the high flyers. I was in the $2,000 IRA section. And we did a very large deal with E.D. Jones, which was very enlightening because they had all these high net worth private equity sales guys trying to sell into E.D. Jones, and it was a clash. So I come in from Boston saying, you need some real wholesalers. You need guys that show up, in a Ford Taurus to wholesale, not a guy that's taking a car service and showing up with a $5,000 Rolex to talk to someone in middle America. It's not going to work. They'll be fascinated, but you're not going to connect. So we went from, I think I went from 4 wholesalers and we hired 20 right away. And then we just kept on going. And then from there, as you know, with Goldman, they kind of move you around to kind of challenge you. And they said, Rick, you got to go to London. And I said, you know what? That's a deal breaker for me. So that is when I moved back to Boston. And one of my vendors was called SalesLink. And they were part of the old Hub Mail, but they were part of a company called CMGI. And I don't know if you remember those guys. They were the first incubator company. They had probably 300, and they were part of Web 1.0. And it was a high-flying stock, and they were incubating web companies. That's where I really got the idea of the web and how I can move that into a larger, broader platform, moving the desktop to the internet. And so I went through that with CMGI, and I was able to, buy some of that CMGI stock. And quite honestly, the next company, I spun it off in 1999 to start a company called CFG, Capital Fulfillment Group. And it was perfect timing, 1999. When the market blows up is the best time to start a company and the best time to invest, right? So it was a very broad premise. We were going to service financial service companies, asset management insurance companies, work with their wholesalers to help them distribute their content to brokers, right? Third-party intermediaries. And at that time, it was all paper. So I had warehouses, but the way they were going to order was from a simple shopping cart technology that we had developed that I kind of figured out from work with CMGI. And we put the entire application in the cloud. Now, they didn't call it the cloud back then, but it was basically active server pages, application service provider, I guess was what they used to call it back then. So we were in the cloud before the cloud happened. And we ran that business up to about $25 million in revenue over a 10-year period. We were first out there. And no one else was really thinking this way because in 1999, almost every asset manager and mutual fund company was thinking about Y2K. Right? Remember when the lights were going to go off when the calendar changed? And we were actually out there preaching the concept of the intranet. And it sounds funny to say that now. I feel almost like Al Gore, like I invented the internet. But we were actually the first guys with a shopping cart, with a capability of looking at your content in a PDF format, saying, I want that. And then when they place the order, I would have a warehouse picking and packing and sending that material out. One of my big clients to start was Associate General. My second account was BlackRock before they became the BlackRock they are today, but it was a 10-year run with them. And we had like 7 warehouses in the New England area. We expanded into Kansas City. But the Y2K thing allowed us to talk directly about technology with marketing and sales, because basically the IT groups were worried about keeping their legacy platforms up and running. And we looked like, we were a cute little idea. And he said, as long as marketing the best thing about sales and marketing is they can't scope anything. So IT did not want to talk to them anyway. So we just took our crayons out and we drew what they wanted. We built it on the web and we were off to the races. And then in 10 years, so that gave me the first idea of managing the intermediary side of it and third-party distribution through the asset managers.
Talking technology, which is probably the first time a lot of those folks, Y2K was scaring everyone. I mean, I remember going to a New Year's Eve, party to see, watch the world shut down. So, but it was a good time to be having those conversations, and probably the first time that some of those guys were willing to have the conversation, because all of a sudden it's in your face. This is important.
And it was a different world. I mean, wholesalers could have meetings, right? RAAs and brokers. There wasn't really any RAAs at all. It was big wirehouses, all about wirehouses back then, if you remember. But they would pick up the phone, right? I mean, people would pick up a phone. My internal sales desk back then, they were sitting stationary, but they were all broken up by territory. But they were still getting regional newspapers delivered to them, so they had some idea what's going on regionally. So the web had not really taken off yet. And the idea of a CRM, the CRMs were not there at all. I mean, people were trying to figure out, do I work with some of the desktop ones out there? Salesforce, I don't even think they sold enterprise client until 2000. I think that the largest account they ever sold was like 50 seats. So we actually had built a CRM back then in 1999. And I told my team, I go, there is no way our clients will ever put their contacts into the web with us, right? I mean, so there's sometimes in your life you have really big misses. I had a really big miss in 1999 because we had it worked and it was a CRM and it was in the cloud. And, we had that whole story before Salesforce.com. And I was a firm believer that they would never do that. But I was wrong by a little bit on that one. So you win some, you lose some.
Always good to recognize the misses. That's it. Isn't it funny? The $100 million idea is what it is. But I've seen so much of that, sort of from that time period. And I'll give Bob Vera's a shout out. I remember him telling me one time that he was on stage, pounding the table going, financial advisors do not need websites. No client will ever go to the web to get a client or to find their financial planner. And he has, of course, rescinded that view and is, very, very much on the forefront of futurizing sort of where this industry is going. But it is funny just how hard it is to see those trends previously. It's easy to look at it now and go, well, of course you put your, clients in the cloud or whatnot and adopt this technology. But we see it even with, minor pieces of technology like scheduling. I have a really tough time getting advisors to use online scheduling tools, even though they're hyper efficient and so much more user friendly for the clients. There will probably come a day where we won't remember that we used to call 150 clients a quarter to schedule their quarterly review meeting, but right now, no one can, see a world where you would just send your clients a link and have them schedule. So always good to see the lessons learned from the past in terms of what we thought would never happen and sort of project that to today. And what are the things that we're saying will never happen? I believe it was, I don't know if it was Kitsis or I can't remember who it was, but said, maybe it was Mitch Anthony, actually, the sacred cows of financial planning, the sacred cows will never slaughter. And how many things do we view as sacred that really and truly aren't and will change in the next 5 or 10 years? So
it gets you turn into the crazy old person, grandpa's on the roof with a leaf blower comments. But, I remember the interoffice envelope. And every once in a while, I saw one the other day somewhere. I don't know where I was. I saw an interoffice envelope. I go, what the hell is that? I mean, but it's kind of funny. So some of these things are kind of, the fact when we were developing our platform, what was good about starting from scratch and having it, it's nice because we were a small team or a big believer in a small team. I think it's kind of one of those things where all our developers are in-house, and we kind of sit down and we do what we call weekend enhancements. We have an idea on Friday. The next thing you know, we're seeing it in beta on Monday. But we made a decision. We had a conversation for 15 minutes going, should part of our distribution platform include a fax? And I go, if we're going to really make the leap, we can't be faxing stuff out. But, there's a lot of advisors out there that, they have a fax machine in their office. They're trying to get signatures on it, or, we know the deli menu is coming through that fax once a day, right? But other than that, so you have to make some of those decisions. When do you cut the cord?
Have you had any advisors actually ask for fax distribution of newsletters or whatnot?
We have not. In fact, we were thinking about the whole print on demand side of it. Yeah, we do. We just haven't. It's funny. We thought when we were bringing, we have about 9 different newsletters that we bring into our platform. It's all e-delivery, but they can download a PDF and print it locally and distribute it. But the whole idea of having a mail service where they send us a list and we send it out to them, we haven't had anyone ask us for that. Because the idea is we're trying to make this very painless and easy to do. If they really want to have some of these newsletters, they can just take the PDF and print it locally, print 10 copies and put it on their coffee table. So there's just no need to do that anymore. And, we don't want to take any credit cards or stamps and all that stuff. We are a big believer, though, that direct mail is kind of like America's pastime. Going to the mailbox is still a pastime. People, I know after a vacation, if I go to the mailbox and there's nothing in it, I'm really disappointed. I mean, I kind of have an empty feeling sometimes that, even if it's junk mail, at least, they recognize you there. So it's kind of a funny thing. People still do that. And even in the asset management side, in my old CFG business, I would say 75% of the stuff we were sending out, even though it was marketing material, we're sending it out overnight or 2-day delivery. Because there's always that promise that, especially from the advisor's point of view, he's going to open a Federal Express package because he's hoping send him a check or send him Cougarants or something, right? There's some type of fantasy that someone is sending him money to invest. So the Federal Express package always got delivered. And a big part of our business was the thank yous, right? So after, an advisor drops $1 million ticket, we were sending out a dozen golf balls with the BlackRock logo on it and a thank you note. Even though the golfer may have a 22 handicap, it had to be Pro V1s and it had to have a thank you note. So it doesn't matter how good a golfer you are, you have to send the top of the line to these guys.
So a couple of things with that I think are really important. And one is from just a marketing perspective. We have gone pure digital. And I do see that there's a mistake in there. And so, even with XY Planning Network advisors, when they sign up, we send them a ton of information with, the via email and through our forums and that sort of thing. But we still put a T-shirt and a card in the mail so that they get that to their house. We do, we've started doing that for advisors on their anniversary and thinking more about that because I think there's a lot of missed opportunity. I was laughing the other day. I got sold by some direct mail, and it was because CenturyLink actually put in fiber internet in Bozeman, and I didn't know that. And come to find out, I had access to 1 gig internet, which is, for anybody not familiar, that's 1,000 megabits, which was, and I got a little flyer, in the mail and caught my eye, and I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me! I didn't know this existed. So even spam sometimes, or maybe that's not spam, that's just direct mailing, will grab folks. But I do think that there's an opportunity to go back to some direct mail. I don't think it all has to go back there, but personalized, like you said, thank yous, small gifts, and things like that are still very powerful marketing and sales tools to really reinforce your value in the mind of the client. So I guess, and some of this is jumping ahead a little bit. I mean, you were effective with golf balls.
We're not here to replace anything, right? The basics still matter, right? The personalized written note is very important. The quick phone call asking how you made out with your procedure, if you had a medical procedure, these things are very, very important. But we just want to kind of help amplify the brand and keep the content cadence going. So here's a good example, right? One of my partners, Joe Devine, I don't know you met, who is our chief product manager. We have worked together back and forth over the years. But at one point, 20 years ago, when I was at State Street, he was there. And I was there for a 10-year period. He actually went back there about 5 years ago before he came back and joined me at this firm. We were at lunch, and a gentleman that we both worked with 30 years ago, right, was at the table at the bar, and Joe had been talking to him recently. He goes, "Hey, you remember Ric McConkey?" Pointing me at, and the guy didn't even pause. He goes, "Oh yeah, Rick. Me and Rick, I see him on the web all the time. I see him on Facebook. I see him on LinkedIn all the time." I had not talked to this guy in 30 years. So, but he knew because my picture was out there. I'm posting stuff. He follows me. We haven't even had a conversation, but he recognized me because even though 30 years have passed, I think I look a little bit different than I did 30 years ago. He felt like we were still connected. And we went right into a conversation like we had not, like it was just, time had passed 15 minutes. We actually had more in common than Joe, who had been working with him over the past 5 years. It was amazing. So it's surprising. When you go to a wedding with your wife and she points out at every table and tells you what their Christmas tree looked like and they just painted their house. I go, how do you know all this? It's because she's on the internet and they're communicating via LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and they're connected. There's not a coffee clutch that is happening that you're not at. It's the web is keeping these people connected a lot closer than they used to be.
So I'm curious, in this day and age, if you're seeing any highly effective, since you live in this world of marketing and sales, the thank you, the gifts, and 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been golf balls. But in sort of this era, do you see any advisors successfully managing sort of like client appreciation gifts or new client gifts or anything like that are effective and could ideas, I guess, for listeners on that area?
Well, I think it goes back to the old premise, right? No one cares how smart you are until they know how much you care, right? So and when you're picking an advisor, I mean, it's all about suitability on both sides. But the first thing is, it's always about the trust thing, right? And how do you build trust unless you're not you have to be communicating with the client or the prospect. The second part that we really find that people kind of brush over is not the suitability of an investment, but the suitability of the relationship, right? So if I'm a regular Joe, right, and I'm a plumber and, I feel kind of blue collarish and my broker feels like he's operating high flying off of Wall Street, it's an uncomfortable situation. I never really feel like I'm connecting, right? So you don't want to you got to really kind of bridge that and make sure that you're providing relevant, dialogue with the client that they understand. I guess we go back to, there's only about 1 million people that subscribe to Wall Street Journal, but there's 330 million Americans, right? So not everyone knows, and that's kind of you think that everyone knows what you know. And I don't know if you saw the Bernie Madoff movie that just came out about Bernie Madoff. So you know about Bernie, right? So his wife's there and she's lived a luxurious lifestyle. And he's at the kitchen table and he's with his two sons and he says, it's all fake. It's all a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. And the actress that plays his wife goes, what's a Ponzi scheme? And I was taken back. I go, how do you not know what a Ponzi scheme is? But then I go, how don't you know what a 12B1 fee is? How don't you know what, a wrap fee is? How don't you know what a universal life policy is? And I go, you know what? Sometimes we live too much in our own financial world that we just don't know what our clients don't know. And bridging that gap by talking financial themes are important, not always talking about product push and performance and the markets, but just trying to connect to them at a human level. That's where the trust is built,
Absolutely.
And I think we forget that. So when you talk about the gifting, the handwritten note is the most powerful gift of all. Thank you for your time, because time is important to the advisors. It's important to the client. And it takes a little extra time to do that. But geez, you know what? A handwritten note, I don't think anything beats it. I really don't.
Totally agree. So I guess what was the connection then that led to FMeX? Did you sell that previous company that was doing the distribution?
This is kind of a funny story with this. So we only work in the financial service market. So this is kind of a story that my father, in God rest his soul, but if he knew I actually repeated this, he goes, geez, the kid actually listened to me. But he used to say, go where the money is. So when I actually did all these businesses, I was working in the financial service industry because that's where the money is. And on the asset management and insurance side, you've all probably been related with businesses at some point. I'll have clients where they say, I'll pay you when I get paid. One of those type of deals, it's kind of like a chain. My receivable problem is your receivable problem. Well, in the financial service industry, they have the money, right? They're just taking the assets right out of the management fees. So there was never really a problem if you're getting paid or financing my business. I was basically self-funded, so it worked very, very well. And we used to say things like, oh, it's a recession-proof business. But that's very interesting to say that, right? Until we hit a recession, until like 2008, 2009 happened. And all of a sudden, Bear Stearns disappeared on us and Lehman disappeared on us. And one of my clients, Thornburg Mortgage, who used to do jumbo mortgages, they were a great client. They were the largest bankruptcy before Bear Stearns. And I went to my accountant. I go, how much do they owe us? They go, Rick, they owe us $500. I go, $500? I mean, I was dancing. I go, how did that happen? We were fully paid. I called them up and they actually had Thornburg mutual funds. So we had two different clients, but the mortgage side blew up and the mutual fund side, they actually had some trouble where they thought they might have to change the name of the company, but they've kind of weathered this storm. We understand what you're going through. You don't owe us any money, but if any communications you want us to help you, we'll go with that. So we went through that process and we had to make a decision. Either we get bigger or we got smaller. And the management team really said, we don't want to get smaller. So we started looking for some acquisitions, but the problem was everything that was for sale was really in bad shape at that time. And the business lines of credit weren't there. The financing wasn't there. So we made a decision to say, if we're going to get bigger, the only way to do that is to roll this up into a larger company. So we were looking at, we had some target companies like ADP or Broadridge. We looked at DST. We looked at Donnelly. We didn't want to go with the printers, but we wanted to roll up into a publicly traded company. So that was a play. And DST came in with a very, very good offer for us. So we sold the company in 2010. And I had a 3-year contract to stay on board for 3 years. So that's what I did. And after 3 years, I kind of sat back and go, what do I want to do next? And, what was my next best bad idea? And I kind of said, what's the evolution of this whole digital distribution? If we're going to be out of this, what I call the fulfillment, pick, pack, and ship and print business, where can we take this? And we really identified that there was a real gap because after the market kind of fell apart, it really turned into a product arms race of pushing product into the advisor marketplace. And we also saw a real trend of the wirehouses losing advisors into becoming independent financial planners or IRAs or into the IBD market. So we saw there's a trend of the centralized technology moving out and centralized marketing moving out, as well as the asset managers kind of retreating from the word practice management. They kind of hijacked it, I think. There's nothing worse than having a wholesaler come in and says, I want to do a presentation on practice management. And they talk about a small cap fund for 20 minutes, right? And God knows the world doesn't need another value large cap fund. So we said, how do we fill that gap? And as we looked at it, it was such a product push. We said, we got to give these guys something that repositions the advisor. And I know this sounds a little bit crass, but we want to reposition them as the product because that's where all the trust is. That's where all the engagement is. They are the product. So how can we enhance their brand and give them content that can kind of help them with their practice? And now that they're going out in the field on their own, and I've done a couple of startups where, when I was working for Goldman Sachs, I make a phone call and next thing you know, I have stationery and business cards. When you're working on your own, you got to go, how do I print a business card? Where do I go to get a business card printed? And do I have to design the whole thing? And do I, so it turns into that type of thing. It's kind of like this whole gig generation that's going on now, right? The gig economy, as they call it, where people are becoming less attached to centralized management. But also the good thing is you don't have Merrill pushing product down your throat saying, this is a syndicate calendar and this is what you have to sell. You really are taking a much more of a fiduciary role with your clients versus just kind of marching to the beat of the wirehouse. So we've said, how do we help them with that?
I love the framing there because I'm not sure I've ever actually said it this way, but now it just makes sense to say that, if you're not selling a product, you are the product, right? And I think this has been sort of the issue that we've experienced with doing marketing, but particularly sales. And I see this from a lot of young planners, especially that are very planning focused, very planning centric, is that we all struggle to sell the value of financial planning because if we've ever done sales training in a wirehouse or an insurance company or whatnot, it was all product focused. It's all transactional focused. And we're moving into this new world of, okay, well, now we're selling ourselves. We're selling our, not necessarily our expertise, although that's part of it, but we're also selling our ability to be there with the client through tough situations, through the good and the bad, and that we'll be there and we'll be available as life happens. And the sale, when you're the product, I think it's not necessarily harder to sell, but it is much, much different than it used to be. And that's a good way of framing it. So when you're thinking about marketing your firm or working with a prospect or whatnot, that it's really got to be about your own brand, your own positioning, your own value statements about yourself because you are the product.
It's a product you know best. It's you.
And yet maybe the hardest one to talk about.
Yeah, we have this conversation, right? What do you talk about with the client when you're not pushing product? The other thing we'd love to say is, salespeople love to be sold, but everyone else likes to buy. So you probably heard the exercise of sell this pencil, right? You don't want to sell the pencil. You want the person on the other side to buy it from you. And you hear the concept of insurance is sold, not bought. Not in the not when you're a financial advisor. You have got to kind of engage the client. I mean, think about the whole robo situation that's coming up, right? And we love to say it. We didn't do the robo. And sometimes I sit here and go, why didn't I? It's technology. Why didn't we go down that direction with it? But you know what? From working with wholesalers and working with advisors and working with brokers, I didn't respect it because it felt to me like a risk analysis, right? You're doing some type of questionnaire with risk tolerance. And then they say, all right, these are the 4 Vanguard funds you should buy. I don't think that's financial planning at all, right? So I didn't respect it. So that's why we didn't build one, right? We think, there's a lot to be said about knowing the aspirations and the dreams of your client, right? A robo is never going to figure out with that 10-question questionnaire of risk tolerance that you have aspirations to start your own business, that you have aspirations to send your kids through college, that you want to get a second home, when you want to retire early. No robo is telling you that, right? That is the personal connection between the advisor and his client saying, how can I help you achieve your financial goals? And you don't do that through a risk tolerance model, right? And you don't do that with 4 Vanguard funds. Well, you might be able to do it with 4 Vanguard funds if you pick the right 4, but it's not that.
Well, and so much of financial planning is not about the investment allocation. And I know that's sort of the world we've come from. But if you look at sort of the art and science of financial planning, I mean, the science is well established. Get a diversified portfolio of ETFs and mutual funds and proper asset allocation, stick with it for the long term, rebalance when necessary, save some for retirement. All of that is it's correct and it's all there, but it's about as effective as, telling people that, if you want to lose weight, all you need to do is eat less and exercise more. That has been wildly ineffective. It's true, it works, but it's not effective in helping people change. And I think that that's one of the big takeaways as we move forward in financial planning is we have to start seeing ourselves as behavioral change artists.
Yes, Alan, I have to interrupt. That's the term. It's, what is it? 80% of financial planning is behavioral management. Is that what they
it is?
It's the behavior of your client. It's not their investments.
And maybe even, and this is a bit of a tangent, we could probably do a whole episode just on this, but I think that's part of the struggle that we've experienced in transitioning advisors from working with older clients to working with younger clients is that when you work with older clients that already have wealth, there's not as much behavioral modification going on. There's not as much skills training and helping learn good habits. They're already rich by the time we started working with them. If you want to work with younger clients, though, we have to take a step back. It's not just about like, oh, you need a budget and you need to save for retirement. It's, hey, let's start learning the skills to save for the future and the skills that are necessary to be successful financially and to become financially healthy. And those conversations are just so different. I think the conversation that we're having with our clients, with our prospects, just with folks in general, is evolving so rapidly that it has been hard to keep up with. And it's been hard, I think, to keep our branding and messaging on point with that. And I know that's sort of where FMeX comes in. So I guess give listeners sort of an overview of, the what. So what does FMeX do? And then a little bit about the why and why you created the platform.
From 10,000 feet, what we do is it's content as a service, right? We are curating, aggregating, and actually creating content that we think is valuable for the advisor to share with his client base. Simple as that. The secret sauce is it's built on top of a sales enablement tool, so it's very easy for them to find it and actually distribute it. And then it becomes the compliance guidelines, right? So, an RIA is not worried about FINRA. We follow best practices of the SEC and FINRA of keeping a track record of every single transaction that's going on from the point of view of a compliance point of view. The second one is we're integrating with some of the larger CRMs. So we're working with Wealthbox, working with Redtail. We just started, it's kind of like going to the dentist. I know I have to go, but I eventually we had to do an integration with Salesforce.com. We knew we had to do it, but we try to avoid it as long as possible. And Juncture. So those are kind of the big players out there, so that we can bring that transaction back to the CRM. So when you look at a client, you can see what you communicated with them, what newsletter they're getting, when was the last time you gave a communication or editorial item. So that's kind of the secret sauce of the sales enablement side. We built the entire platform in the cloud, right? And we had previous experience doing that, so it wasn't new to us. But there's no legacy platform in doing it. And we just want to make it easy to connect the client with his account base, and also developing the whole what we call content cadence, communication with the client so that they know that they still care, and also the right content to the right person at the right time. So the segmentation is kind of interesting because the best example that people kind of say is, I want to have a newsletter. And they usually start off with the idea of, I'll write my own, right? So I was an English major and I've had writer's block since 1978. So we know great aspirations. You get that first newsletter out and you say, I don't think I'm going to do this monthly. I think I'm going to go to quarterly. Then 2 months go by, it turns into semi-annual. And usually once they go up to the 6 month, they go, why don't I just buy one? The problem with buying a newsletter is you make one buying decision and you say, you buy a newsletter that's all retirement oriented. You look at your average book and the average book is about 150 clients. That's another thing that's interesting with our conversation with advisors. We ask them how big their book is. The first thing they say is, 300 million, 500 million. You know, our office has 1.2 billion, right? They go, we don't care how big you are for money. How many people are you dealing with? And then they go, well, I never really thought of it that way. Is it 100 people? Is it 300 people? Is it 500? Right? So that's the number we're keeping track of. And we're finding through our research, average is about 150 clients. So that's a big book, right? Two problems, right? Everyone's looking for an exit strategy. So acquisition. So if I can't talk to 150 clients, how am I going to buy someone else's book? And now I got 300 clients, right? So it's the 80-20 rule, right? So you want to make sure there's some clients that need your immediate attention you have to talk to. There's some other clients that you kind of want to work through and grow with them. But you want to have that content case. So we want to get the right newsletter to them so they can say, all right, let's segment the book. These are my high net worth clients, right? So they want something a little more sophisticated. These are my retirees. So there's obviously a topic there. These are my millenniums or my Generation X. These are my women in business, very different topics. So they can actually segment the book and send out 9 different newsletters, the same price, and they're relevant to each one of those clients in a different way than they are by just doing an email blast. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, marketing can be done either to prospects, of course, but also to the existing client base. And this is something I think many of our advisors struggle with is, we charge a monthly fee, and it doesn't mean you have to do anything on a monthly basis with your client. But if you can get a monthly touch point with your newsletter that's client specific, it's a nice value add. It's a nice way to stay in front of your clients. But I guess, how do you handle personalized content versus not? Because obviously just buying a single newsletter and blasting it to all your clients doesn't work. I totally agree with the segmentation, but I guess do advisors sort of meld? I guess I'm just asking, do advisors meld that pre-written content with their own content and ideas to try to create like a personalized newsletter?
Yeah, so what we do is we kind of merge the personal brand with the content. So the content's out there, but everything that goes out is with the personal brand of the advisor. So his logo, his picture. I mean, it's the old trick of the real. If you bought in a house in the past 15 years, you never got a business card from a real estate agent and didn't have their picture on it, right? And we always laugh because in the wholesaler business, we always, if I followed up a wholesaler that was in an office and he was an MFS wholesaler, they go, oh yeah, he's a good guy. Rick's a good guy. He goes, what firm is he with? They remember, Rick, but they don't remember what firm he's with. He was a Pioneer 2 years ago, and now he's with MFS, and next week he'll be selling REITs. So what we want to do is always put the picture of the advisor with his logo, his bio, links back to his website, his Twitter feed, his Facebook feed, his LinkedIn and Facebook feeds, right? So a call to actions with it. So his brand is never separated from the content. Then as they send it out, they're allowed to put their own content, opening paragraph, or this might be interesting, or hope to see you next week. It's kind of funny because when we talk about the newsletter, it's segmentation, but we really start the premise with one-to-one communication. We start off with sending one document or one idea to one client. And it's a simple story. Say I'm in, and this is one that's usually happened. I'm at the country club, and after playing a round of golf. And a guy goes, hey, my brother-in-law just set up a Rabbi Trust. What do you think, Rick? Right? Now, what do I know about Rabbi Trust, right? But I'm not going to say anything of that nature. I'm going to say, you know what? Why don't you come in the office next week? We'll have lunch. We'll talk about it. Now I go on FMeX, right? I look up Rabbi Trust. What is a Rabbi Trust? A Rabbi Trust in a semantic search. Give him several articles. I fire off that article to Bill and say, hey, Bill, you know what? Great round of golf today. Looking forward to next week. Why don't you take a look at this? And we'll talk about it next week. And it's a whole article talking about Rabbi Trust, the pros and cons of them. So you look like you're responding to the question, you're pre-feeding for a meeting, and you look like you're on top of your game, right? Without a lot of work. No one wants to look like a dummy, right, to their client, but it's a vast network of questions. How do you do that? And so we start with that one-to-one communication, and then we go to one to a few, which is segmentation. And then the one-to-many is when we're really trying to help them develop leads through social syndication. And it's still a referral business, but you want to be out there. And it's kind of funny. The XYP marketplace is a lot younger than the RA market in general. I think your average age is about 35 years of age, Alan. But our core market is about 55 years of age. So we have advisors say, yeah, Facebook, my kids are on that, or my wife's on Facebook and my kids are on Twitter. Yeah, I really don't know what to do with it. I don't think it's for me. And we kind of laugh. We go, well, think of it this way, right? You got to broadcast your brand. You don't have to write a check for advertising, but you can get referrals this way. If you get about we've identified once you do it about 60 times, you will get some activity to your website or an inbound inquiry. All right. So they do what I call broker math. So if I say 60, they go, oh, that's once a week. I go, no, that's like 60 times a month. And that's when the head starts to spin a little bit. I got to kind of slow it down. I go, think of it this way, guys. You guys really work in a stationary position because you're all about the market in your mind. No matter what I say, you're always saying the opening bell is at 9:30, right? So you send out a Facebook blast at 9:30. How tough is that? It takes 10 seconds on the platform. Then you go to lunch every day. I'm pretty sure you go to lunch every day. So at 12 o'clock, you send something out on LinkedIn, right? Then the market closes at 4 o'clock. There's a big bell. We always want to see who rang it. And then at 4 o'clock, you send something out on LinkedIn, right? So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, right? You can do the same content. It's going to be 3 different audiences. But now you have to start thinking, what is Facebook? Facebook is all the people I used to know, right? And then LinkedIn's all the people I do know. Then Twitter's all the people I want to know. So you can actually do 3 different things there, but it's all about your personal brand. So you don't want to do anything silly, and you certainly don't want to do anything automatic where there's some type of algorithm guessing what you think should be put in public. So we're looking for some level of sponsorship, but it takes about, probably about 30 seconds of your day to do this. And at some point, if you do that 3 times a day over a 20-day, calendar month, right? That's 60. Bingo. You're going to get a lead. Someone's going to get a referral. Someone's going to talk about you.
That's where you get to 60.
It's what I call the e-advisor math.
So at the beginning of the year, we purchased HubSpot as a marketing tool for XY Planning Network for us marketing to advisors. And it just has a fascinating and almost creepy amount of information. So, and I'll give you an example. We just had someone join, and we always look back to see sort of how they found us and that sort of thing. And this particular advisor had visited our website they had visited the website 118 times in 2017. So in less than 5 months, they have visited our website 118 times and have viewed 362 web pages or pages on our site. It's amazing the amount of content absorption that people have. And we didn't know they were doing this, right? Like they're doing this on their own time, in their own way, and they're interacting with us and reading our content and listening to the podcast and reading the blog. And I don't think advisors realize how much their prospective clients are actually interacting with their marketing materials because it feels, disconnected, like, oh, I don't really know. And I don't recommend most advisors go out and buy HubSpot. It's fairly expensive, but there are other ways of getting at least some data, Google Analytics, which is free, and some other tools like MailChimp to track clicks and that sort of thing. And I'm assuming your platform provides some insights as well to be able to actually see how much a prospect is interacting with us before they become a client or before they ever reach out. I think it would blow some advisors' minds to know just how much folks are reaching out.
Yep. So Alan, to go back, the general premise of our business model was cloud, social, mobile, right? So you probably heard that before in that trilogy, right? The cloud gives us full scalability and easy access to our clients. Social is really trying to help the advisor engage social syndication because it's different and there is a leap of faith at some levels, but it doesn't cost you any money. It's really a cost of your time to do it. But I can tell you, you're going to get better results in doing it than if you don't do anything, right? So we got to kind of train them on how to get that cadence going. And then the third one is mobile. And mobile is a little bit different because on the mobile, most people think about having a mobile app. And while we do have a mobile app, that's not what we think about. because the advisors are usually in their office with CNBC going, and they have the Bloomberg up, and they get the financial. They're much more stationary, but their clients are all mobile. So we have to make sure all the content, because most of the time they're reading this stuff on a handheld, which we call the third eye nowadays, right? And or a tablet or some other type of laptop, some smaller screen device, right? So we have to make sure all our content is HTML5, so it looks correct on those devices. Because it's where they're consuming is in a mobile environment. That's where the client is. The client's mobile, not the advisor, but the client is. So that's kind of our take on the cloud social mobile side of it. So we understand that it's a moving target, and it's hard to really clearly define what the ROI is on doing this. But I can tell you that there's a new audience of investors who want to engage with the advisor differently. It's almost like passive engagement, right? It's like when I call my daughter and she doesn't pick up the phone, but she texts me back 5 seconds later. They want to control the conversation. So you got to start the conversation whether you're controlling it or not. So that's kind of where we see the social syndication going.
So I know a couple of months ago, FMeX purchased Advice IQ. So I'm just curious about that merger and how, I guess the reason for the purchase and then, the benefits that you've seen from that.
We haven't fully rolled that out yet. So that content is really rich, right? It's written by financial publishing professionals, almost kind of like, I don't know what you would call it exactly, almost like ghostwriting for the advisors, but these are great advisor stories. So what we wanted to do is repurpose that so that these advisors became contributors to FMeX, one. And the second thing is, and this is kind of a deal that we're working on right now with Audible. So we're talking about bringing the spoken word back into our platform. So we're going to start off with a Book of the Month Club for practice management and enlightenment. The second part of it would be for gifting, so that you could actually, I'm supposed to meet with a client and they say they're going to Aruba for the week. I send them a free book from Audible that they might find interesting. It's just another engagement. Say, you might find this interesting, and it's a gift process. And it only costs if the client actually downloads it. So that's the second part of it. And then the third part is Audible is developing this concept called channels. And it's really kind of a way of managing podcasts on the Audible platform. So our idea is really, and what we're working through is developing an Advice IQ channel. So to go back and take those stories and bring them to the spoken word so that the advisors can send those ideas and stories to their clients. So that's kind of where we're working with that whole thing. So it wasn't just a matter of buying those. We want to offer something different to the advisors. And there's about 400 advisors that participated in the Advice IQ program. So as we firm up our deal with Audible, that's kind of our goal, is to kind of bring these advisors who were basically putting these articles into part of a public relations side of it, getting it published by Wall Street Journal or by Barron's, and then, getting, reprints and sending to their clients. We want to repurpose those stories and bring it to the spoken word. And we think it's just an interesting way of doing something a little bit different with the clients. Because once again, nobody's reading anything, but as we say in the business, right? They want pictures, they want videos, they want audio. So we want to see if we can pull this together with that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It's a very cool concept. And it's a good reminder. Yeah, no, I need to. I've sort of neglected trying to get XYPN radio on Audible, which is just a great distribution channel. But we have seen that with this podcast, that we started this as a way. Honestly, part of the reason for starting this podcast was to try to save our advisors from getting 100 phone calls from 100 people that had the same question over and over. So I figured it's easier for me just to have you on. We'll have this conversation, and then a bunch of people can listen to it instead of you having to have this one-on-one conversation. It can be a one-to-many distribution. And what we found was, we chose audio over video. One, video is very expensive, but it also requires a captive audience. So sort of like content, written content, where you have to be sitting there at your computer watching the video, which works sometimes, but it is really hard to make video engaging at a price point that makes sense. And so audio is just such a cool medium that I think sort of got skipped over, and we're going back to it, and you're going back to it, which is so cool, that because it allows you to use your what I've heard called time within time. So when you're working out, or you're driving on your commute, or you're, walking the dog, there's this opportunity. And really the only thing you can actually absorb is audio. You can't absorb video, you can't absorb written content, but you can absorb audio. And there's a wide open world, I think, of audio content and education through that medium that can be shared. And we've had good luck with that, with this podcast even. And I've seen that from Kitsis's podcast and others. So.
Yeah, it's funny when we talk about reading in general and content, to your point on that final note, we call it's the beach, bathroom, and bus where people are reading, right? So the idea is, how do you make it easy? It's certainly on the beach and on the bus and in the commute side of it, to have it audio is a little bit easier. So we agree with you 100%. We just think it's easy. You can just plug this in and go and do. We're all multitasking, unfortunately. Yep. So the idea that you put the audio stream in, you're listening while you're on the treadmill. It works all the time. Or you just commute, and it's still a big. A lot of the advisors are still commuting into major metropolitan areas. So in the commute, it's an easy way to do it as well, and just general travel.
Yeah, folks have joked with me before. They say I'm their workout buddy, and just listening to their 1 hour of content a week that XYPN Radio puts out. And for folks that come in late and are just now finding the podcast, they have 102 hours of content to go back and catch up on. And they do that while training for a marathon or walking the dog or whatnot. Well, Ric, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and be on the show. As we're sort of wrapping things up, I'll ask you our sort of closing question. You have had a lot of experience starting businesses and getting involved with a lot of different things and sort of keeping your hand in different pots, which I think is awesome. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, sort of one thing you wish you had known then that you have learned, and again, would like to be able to go back and have had earlier on in your career, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
That's a hard one, because I've had really kind of a blessed life. Even just working in the financial service marketplace, it's not like I've ever been a traveling salesman where I've stayed at Motel 6s. We have a kind of a luxurious life where even our conferences are at golf resorts and our travels in major metropolitan areas. So I feel kind of bad sometimes when I see a real salesman or I shake a hand of a real fisherman, right? When I can feel the roughness of a real working man. And I'm complaining about my calluses, which are from a very bad golf swing. So it's hard for me to feel that way. But I think the real thing is what has been really good for me, and it's just I've been lucky, right? And I'd rather be lucky than smart in many, many cases. I mean, the woman I married is an accountant and a paralegal, and she's kind of the opposite of my risk and creative side, where she kind of evens me out. And I've always said, if things aren't good at home, things aren't going to be good at work. And I've always been lucky that things have always been good at home. So it's tough, because I know a lot more people are living as single nowadays. It's a lot larger dynamic. But it was always good to have a married partner that I was able to stay with. And I always, one of the things that always come up is, Ric, I've been married for 38 years. What's the success of being married? And I always say, don't get divorced. And it's that simple. To keep a marriage together, just don't get divorced. It's real simple. And there's a whole bunch of bad broker comments on why a divorce is good and why it costs so much, because it feels so good, I guess. But there's two different elements to that. But like I said, I've been very lucky to be born in a place where technology was moving very rapidly, and there were no real barriers to it. If you really just jumped on something and experiment with it, you can kind of go forward with it. So I think the advice I would, I don't have a moment I'm not like R.W. Marriott, who says, the secret to, running a hotel is that the shower curtain always goes inside the tub, not outside the tub. There's nothing that clear cut. It's just a matter of persistence. And, I like the idea, the idea that do what you love to do. I mean, it's that simple. If you're unhappy and you just, life's too short to not work with good people and not work with friendly people, and you just got to move that nonsense out of your life sooner. The one thing I did have when I was a young manager, and this is good advice I got, and it took me a long time to accept it, is, when you're building a team, rank them on a 1 to 10. And the reality of it is, everybody wants 10s, but sometimes you have 7s. And the 7s you can get to be a 10 by coaching them and working with them. But if there are three, they're a miss. And you just got to get rid of your threes real quickly. Just don't. Yeah. And I think I had the Jesus complex where I thought I could save everybody, and I was going to take that three and I'd spend on. And one of my mentors said to me, Kareem, he said he used to run Syndicate over at EF Hutton and Shearson, and he goes, Rick, you're really good with your staff. You spend a lot of time with them, but you're spending too much time with the weak people. And on your best day and their best day, they're only going to become a 5. That's not going to be good enough. You got to just kind of weed through that faster and work with the talent that's going to get you where you want to go. And it sounds harsh, but it took me a long time to figure that out. It took a long time, especially with smaller groups and smaller IRAs too. All right. I mean, they're small teams. There's nowhere to hide. If I was working for Fidelity or working for, Schwab, there's lots of places to hide in these 10,000, employee businesses. But when you're a team of 5 or a team of 6, there's no place to hide.
Yep. Got to be on your A game. And we find
that was a good one, Alan.
A players.
You may have to fix that. You may have to edit that one. You may have to fix that one.
No, I think it's great. And I think that the other point that you made is an important one. And that is that if things aren't good at home, they won't be good at the office. And that sometimes, especially as entrepreneurs, we obsess over our business and we obsess over this new thing that we're creating because it really is our obsession. It's what makes us successful, but it also can lend itself to not paying attention to what really matters, and that is keeping that relationship at home where it needs to be. Because if you're in a failing relationship, it is really, really hard to be successful in your business. So if I could add to it, spend the time and the money on, even couples therapy. Even if you're not in a bad spot, couples therapy can help you stay in a good spot. Is invest in your relationship and go on dates and go on vacations and spend time together, because ultimately that's gonna be a huge driver of your success. But Rick, thank you again. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. We really do appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. It goes back to your original comment, right? You are the product. So that's all it is.
You are. It's very true. All right. Well, thanks so much, Rick. We appreciate it. That concludes today's podcast, and I'd like to again thank our partner, FMeX. Remember that over 70% of clients say content marketing makes them feel closer to their advisor. You can learn more about their content as a service and how FMeX helps financial advisors connect with clients and increase sales by visiting www.fmexdirect.com. Remember, clients want to receive personalized content from their financial advisors, and FMeX can help. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.